Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Residential Landlord Association's live reaction to the budget this afternoon presented by the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. I'm John Stewart, I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Research, and we're going to look through the limited announcements that were in the budget that affect the landlord community. Now, I think the first thing to say is it's a fairly quiet budget on the landlord front, and I think that will be fairly welcome. There was a lot of speculation around about the need to pay for coronavirus spending. Capital gains in particular had been singled out as a potential target following the report from the Office of Tax Simplification, but the Chancellor has, very wisely in our view, and certainly very welcome, decided not to play about with capital gains tax. There's going to be no increase in the rates, although it does leave residential property at a relative disadvantage to other asset classes, and there's been no change to the capital gains allowance. It's remaining at £12,300. Stamp duty has been the Chancellor's favourite tax to play with. We saw the tax-free limit rise to £500,000. That has been extended by 3 months to the end of June, and then a reduction in that limit to £250,000 to the end of September, before returning to its former limit at £125,000 from October the 1st. That will undoubtedly help those in the market who have been buying properties and who've been worried about completing before the original deadline of the 31st of March. So some welcome news there for those landlords who were buying and were perhaps worried about their completion times. Also, some limited good news around about welfare. We've seen the continuation of the £20 uplift in universal credit for a further 6 months. That's something that the NRLA, along with many other groups, were calling for, so that will help a little for those claiming benefits. But otherwise, it's been a bit of a disappointing budget for the residential property sector. The Chancellor continues to promote generation rent to generation buy. He mentioned that again in his speech today. And of course, our main concern at the moment is those tenants who have built up rent arrears during the pandemic with little way and little hope of paying those off without government support. We have been calling for a loan scheme for tenants where the tenant would take out the loan and that money would be paid to the landlord to cover rent debt. That would protect the tenant in the property for a period of time. It would protect their credit rating and protect them from eviction. But unfortunately, there's been no announcement on that front, nor does there seem to be any significant uplift in discretionary housing payment levels or other hardship funds available via local authorities to help tenants who are in debt. So the eviction ban is due to be lifted at the end of March. We need to wait and see what happens with that. But without that financial support for renters, then there is a risk of evictions and rent debt. And of course, building up rent debt is the worst possible thing for a government that wants to turn generation rent into generation buy. So a lot of disappointment there in the budget for renters and those landlords whose tenants have found themselves in financial difficulty. But as I say, otherwise, a quiet budget. A lot of us will welcome that. No news is often good news. There perhaps has been some missed opportunities. We think the government could have gone further and been more explicit in terms of support for the green economy, in particular to help landlords meet minimum energy efficiency standards. And we'll continue to press the government on that. We'll also continue to press the government to make smarter use of the existing tax regime, particularly capital gains and stamp duty, to support their objectives of helping first-time buyers onto the housing market. But as I say, a quiet budget, maybe better news than people were expecting. No one ever gets everything they ask for in a budget, and certainly not at a time of a health pandemic. We will now await the autumn statement. We will go away and think about how we approach the fiscal event in the autumn and with an eye on to next year's budget. The one big negative, I think, for incorporated landlords is the flagged up increase in corporation tax. That will take effect in a few years' time. It's not immediate. A bit of tax tomorrow, if you like, from the Chancellor. And interesting that is going to be on a sliding scale, so those with the smallest profits will be protected from the worst impact of that increase in corporation tax from 19 to 25% that's coming down the line in a few years' time. So, incorporated landlords will have to keep an eye out for that. Will it affect landlords' appetite for incorporation? That very much depends on the balance of other taxes, including the full rollout of mortgage interest relief that landlords will face from this year. So a bit of a mixed bag, a quiet budget, perhaps better than a lot of people expected, but room for improvement would be our verdict. Thank you for listening.